second. I don't know how to time this right exactly. Everybody. Hi, everybody. This is Greg Suddy, Suddy on Soccer. I'm wearing my colors today. I'm here with Sean Bowers, General Manager of the San Diego Sockers. Sean, thank you so much for your time. I know you're a very busy man. I appreciate you giving me this time this afternoon and joining me here online.
Thanks, Suddy. Yeah, listen, man, I'm all yours. Whatever you need, I'm here.
and that is your nature. So for those of you that may not know, a little bit, just a little brief little bit. Sean Bowers is a former Rookie of the Year in 1992, four-time Defender of the Year in various different indoor leagues, six-time first team All-Star, and 4 years with the Kansas City Wizard in the MLS. Long career of playing indoor soccer. But Sean, what I want to start with first, like I do with everybody, is where it all got started, and in your case, it got started in San Diego, California, in 1968. How was it growing up in San Diego, California? And talk a little bit about what turned you on to soccer and what got you involved in soccer as a kid.
I mean, it was really, at the time, it was really just recreational soccer. My dad was coaching, and just loved it and just started playing, and it grew on me, and love playing multi-sports. So love baseball, love football, love soccer. And when you're young, you should be playing as many sports as you can. So really just started with my dad coaching me, and Mira Mesa, grew up in Mira Mesa Rattlers at the time, and wasn't really competitive. It was just recreational.
So you started playing. Were you playing in high school and that was what high school were you going to? Mira Mesa?
Yeah, I went to Mira Mesa High School.
Were you playing soccer in Mira Mesa High School? You were a goalkeeper.
Goalie. So yeah, I went out my freshman year, went out and made the freshman team as a goalkeeper. And then, in high school, as soon as you go out for a certain position, that's kind of your stigma really throughout your whole 4 years out of high school. So I played goalie freshman, in my sophomore year, and then obviously went varsity my junior and senior year. And then on my senior year, I started to have a thought process that I was getting bored in goal. I don't know how you can really get bored in goal, but I wasn't really, it felt like I wasn't getting the action that I wanted, right? And I had played some on the field as a player, but then I kind of did a dual role of goalkeeper one half and then on the field. And then that kind of processed my brain as I was getting older that, maybe I really wasn't a goalkeeper and wanted to try to play, on the field.
What? When did you first started playing club soccer with the La Jolla Nomads?
Oh, I think I was probably around 15, 16. Club soccer was nothing like it is right now. Club soccer is everywhere.
Right.
It wasn't that prevalent, growing up. I guess I'm aging myself, but the Nomads were it. It was the place that you wanted to go, and that's, I think, around 15, 16, probably right around my sophomore, junior year. And then going into my senior year, playing goalkeeper for the Nomads. Anton Nissel was the starting goalie. I was the backup goalie. He played at UCLA. That's actually where I ended up meeting Paul Wright. Paul Wright and I were teammates. A couple soccers. Paul Gavazon was a Nomad. Mike Demko was a Nomad. I don't want to leave anybody out. But, yeah, that's kind of how we all were connected, although they're younger than I am, Mike and Paul.
That's really interesting. So you played at Miramar College. Miramar College is a 2-year college here in San Diego, and you played at Miramar College, and then transferred to Quincy University in Illinois. What was the motivation? What was the hook that made you decide to go from Southern California to Quincy University in Illinois?
Well, we did a trip to the Dallas Cup I was playing on a club team at that particular time, the San Diego Sun, and a coach from Quincy College at the time. It's Quincy University now, but Quincy College came and scouted, and like 3 of us, we took a trip out there, and I loved it. It was just a hometown feel, right in the middle of the Midwest, right on the Mississippi, nothing I've ever been a part of before. And soccer was king there. Quincy College in the 70s and 80s were, 5, 8-time NAIA champions, and they just made the move to Division I the year before I went there. So it all kind of added up and lined up for me. And then, getting a scholarship, which was important for me too. And it just kind of aligned, and had a good weekend out there and had fun and met a lot of people and decided to take the leap.
My dad grew up in just north of Chicago, Illinois. And when I was a teenager, one of our family traditions was at 1 year during your teenage years, you go out and spend the summer and hang out with grandma and grandpa on Lake Michigan, just north of Chicago. That's one of the things that we did. And we spent a summer there. And it was interesting. I can relate to what you're talking about, because this is 40 miles north of Chicago, small town environment, Midwest, on the lake. So it was kind of funny because the Lake Michigan, if you're coming from Southern California, you're thinking of like Lake Tahoe or something like that. And it's not like that. I mean, it's an ocean.
No, not at all.
It's got beaches and waves, and you can't see the other side. It looks like an ocean.
Yeah.
So,
and quick story about that. Yeah, quick story about that. My very first night in Quincy, I was staying at the coach's house. And I'm a California boy, don't see really storms. You have earthquakes,
Right.
And the very first night I was there was a warning that came on the TV probably about 6 o'clock at night. And I look out the window and it looked green. Like the stories you hear about storms in the Midwest, completely green out. And they were talking about tornado watches and warnings, and tornadoes are coming through. And I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. This is definitely not the spot for me, because there's no way. I've heard stories about tornadoes, right? So my very first day didn't turn out the greatest, but it ended up being an awesome experience for 4 years.
I can kind of share that, because some years later, I was working for a major airline and based in St. Louis. I was based in St. Louis, and St. Louis, Missouri. I'm on the plane. We're boarding the plane, and I'm on board the plane, and the sirens start going off, and I look outside the airplane and I see the same thing you're talking about. Green sky, green clouds, just looks super sketchy. And I get to thinking, heck, I'm on an airplane. An airplane is designed to catch wind. I mean, what the heck? What the heck am I doing here?
Not a good spot to be in. No. I have a few tornado stories of playing in my career throughout the Midwest that you're like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? Why would you live there and you're going to have to go through a tornado? And being from California, it was definitely scary for me. And the very first night, and the coach promised me it would get better.
Oh, that's incredible. So now didn't you guys have some success at Quincy while you were there?
Yeah,
so what was?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say you were named the team MVP for scoring. So you're playing offense at this point.
Yeah, so I went there more like as a midfielder. I'm kind of like a central midfielder. Sometimes I played out on the wing. Our best year was probably my freshman year, although really at the start didn't play very much and worked my way in, which was great. But we had a great team. We were basically one game away from making the NC2A playoffs, and for a team that just made it up to Division I, it was pretty good. But funny story of all of that is again, soccer is such a small community of people that everybody's connected. It ended up being my 4 years at Quincy, we played Western Illinois. Well, Western Illinois had players like Tommy Sohn, who's a coach now at Birmingham in the USL, Ted Eck, who also was in the MLS, who I played with. And then the head coach of Western Illinois was David Durr. And David Durr, in 1996, when I made the leap into the MLS, David Durr was the director that was in charge of doing all the contracts. So again, such a small world of how it's all interconnected in the soccer world.
It really is a small community. And it's interesting. I'm getting a chance with this series of interviews that I started a couple of months ago. It's fun. It's fun because I jump in and I do some research and I get to know before I actually get to talk to these people. I get to know stuff about them, and then get to know you guys and talk to you guys. Now, of course, you and I have spoken a number of times before, but
Yeah.
It's really cool to get to know and learn more about who these people are and how small the community really is. I mean, it really is. After you got out of Quincy University, it wasn't a long time before you signed your first contract. But before I ask that question, had you up to this point played very much indoor soccer with Fords?
Yeah, growing up, right? So growing up, playing in National City was really the only place that had indoor at the time. And then as we got into high school, North County Soccer Park was kind of where we played all the time.
Right.
And then there was an amateur team that Ron Pennick put together, who used to live in El Cajon, and he put together this, all-star indoor team, and we would go every year and go play in the amateur tournament, kind of like a professional. Not professional, but an amateur tournament, but was a really big tournament at the time for U19 and below. And we went to Atlanta. There was in San Diego. There's in Riverside, and our team actually ended up winning the amateur championship. So the year I went to Quincy, Paul Wright was on that team, and so was Rene Ortiz, who now is our assistant coach for the Sockers. So they actually signed a contract with the San Diego Sockers, and I went off to college. So again, small world, right, of all of our interconnections. But, Rene and Paul went into the Sockers, and obviously all the amazing things they did with the Sockers. And I went on to college and did a different route.
Wow. So, but the San Diego Sockers were actually the first team that you played with, even though at that point it was a very brief stay before you went to the Rockers. Is that correct?
Yeah. So in 91, I actually was Sockers, signed me to, it was the last year of the old MISL. So the very last year of the old MISL. And they signed me to a contract, and I played. And then I decided, I didn't know if that's what I wanted to do because I was still deciding on a contract. Not Detroit picked me in a draft. I went out there, tried out. And then as I got out there and tried out, they wanted to sign me to a contract. Well, then in the meantime, the Soccer said, hey, our first game is in 3 days in Dallas. Meet us down there. We're going to send you a contract. So sent me a contract. I signed it. I was with my dad. We drove to Dallas, played my very first shift I ever played. I think I played 1 or 2 shifts, was a defensive runner. That's, Ron Newman, when you become your very first, you're a defensive runner for people. So that's what I did. And then when I drove back to San Diego, because we were supposed to play 2 nights later, I think on Sunday, there was the Sockers in a trade ended up getting Paul Wright to San Diego, filled my spot, which was the extra spot. And then I got to put on the developmental team, which then I ended up leaving and going back to the Rockers. So again, right, connected with Paul. And I think through the story that you'll hear, Paul and I have a lot of connections. Our kids were born in the same city. But yeah, so Paul ended up leaving Cleveland, signing with the Sockers, which means they need a roster spot. And, I was low man on phone pole.
You played for the Rockers in the NPSL for a couple of years at that point. And were you not at some point during that time named Rookie of the Year and also at some point assistant player coach?
Yeah, so in 91 through 95 in Detroit, yeah. So my rookie year, I was Rookie of the Year. And that year was amazing for me because, number one, we won the championship my very first year, which was great. But also, even more importantly, the players that I played with really helped me become a professional because, your very first year in that terms, right, you're trying to learn the ropes. And so I played with Andy Chapman, who was a legend, Drago, Danny O'Keefe, Brian Finnerty, Jay White, really old school mentality players. And I kind of just fit in, which was great. I was young. I could run up and down. Every time I got the ball, I gave it to Drago and let him do his thing, got on the back post. Andy Chapman, and then lastly, really the coach that we had there was Brian Tinian, and he kind of was a player's coach, much like Ron Newman was, and let the players, be in charge in terms of leadership. And he got on us once in a while, but really the players kind of ran the team. And it was an amazing first year that I ever had. And it was just a kind of a really good stepping stone on, learning to become a better professional and making a name for the Detroit Rockers and winning the championship.
So you were also playing, or very shortly after you started playing for the Rockers, if it wasn't the first year, it might have been the second, that during the offseason you started playing. The CISL is now, so now there's the NPSL operating in the traditional season, and the CISL is operating as a summer league. And you were playing year-round soccer with the Rockers, and at first with the Sacramento Knights of the CISL, and then you played with the Anaheim Splash as well in the CISL. All while you were playing with the Detroit Rockers. Is that correct?
Yeah. Pretty taxing on your body. At that time in the NPSL, we were playing 40 games. So right now in the MASL, we play 24 games. Right? So we were playing 40 games.
Wow.
And we would have games where you play Friday night. I remember specifically, play Friday night at home in Detroit, jumped in vans, drove to Baltimore, played Saturday night in Baltimore, drove that night to Harrisburg, played Harrisburg in the afternoon because it was a Sunday game, and then drove back to Detroit. So we played 3 games in 3 days.
Well, I remember at one point the original MISL was playing a 48-game season, and so there was some of that 3 games in 3 days kind of things going on back then as well. But I mean, when you look at the 24-game season that is being played today, thinking about doubling that, people it's pretty funny actually, because people complain about the back-to-back games that are played and how taxing those are, having no real concept of what it would be, not just to play back-to-back games, but to travel with 3 games in a row and traveling in all 3 games.
Yeah.
So
the kinesiology professor in me would tell you, I'm glad we don't do that, right?
Yep.
Because I'm sure there were so many more injuries at that time. There were a lot of issues that we had to deal with, right? And I think right now, 25 games gives a lot of rest time, which is something our players need so that they could be at their optimum. And then also, back in the day, I'm going to age myself because I'd say I never said that, but back in the day, you miss 3 weeks, you can miss like 10 games, right? Now in 3 weeks, you might miss 4 games, right? So again, right? I think the way that we do it now is more conducive for success across the board for players, owners, general managers, all of that.
Fans too. Fans too. If you're a fan, it's a lot easier. It's a lot more. It's a lot better to make it to a game once a week than it is to try to make a game 3 times a week, or anything like that on any given week during the season. So if you look down here in the chat room, I've put up here from our friend Richard. Who is the best indoor player you have ever seen?
Woo. Well, that I've ever seen or I've ever played with, because that would be 2 different in terms of played against. I would tell you.
He said seen.
Seen the one ever seen. I will tell you, and I'm probably biased, and I'm going to give you 2, not 1. Is one I'm partial. Obviously, I grew up in San Diego, so I would tell you Julie V. Grew up here watching him play. I used to do summer camps, and Julie V used to be there. So from a growing up standpoint, idolizing wise, I would say Julie V indoor. I would also have to say, and not that one's better than the other, but I was in awe because I played with him, would be Preki. So playing with Preki, I played against Preki in the old CISL because he played in San Jose for the Grizzlies. Before we became teammates, That was in 95. We became teammates in 96 in the MLS. We played in the same team for 4 years. And I would tell you probably those two players, just because I've seen them the most and I got to be connected to them. Because Preki could do things with the ball that I've and he was going to do it, and he still did it.
Right. That's right. Well, I've got mentioning Julie. Julie's a real dear friend of mine these days, and it's been, I was in my early adulthood when I started going to the San Diego Sockers games at the stadium when the Sockers played only outdoor soccer. And of course, Julie V was the marquee player. I mean, he was the guy that was, pumped in the press. Always had a good, a good quote. And it's been amazing to go from watching him play to including him in my circle of very close friends. I love Julie V very much. And yeah, what an outstanding player he was. I mean, what an outstanding player he was.
And he could do it outdoor. He could do it indoor. I mean, he was such a presence. He was somebody that, wanted attention, that demanded attention in terms of being on the field. I would also throw in Brian Quinn in there. I played for Brian as he was a coach, but watching him play, and he was also somebody I was, one of my favorites. And I think that's one of the reasons, and I know we're going down this in the timeline, but that's one of the reasons why I ended up taking the job as a general manager, is because coming full circle, growing up in San Diego, going to the games when they won all the championships, being part of their summer soccer that I was part of there as a kid, and going to their games in high school. And they had a very big impact on me and what I wanted to be when I grew up.
So after this period with the Rockers, you got contacted by or signed by, or however it played out, you ended up playing with the Kansas City Wizards in the MLS. Now, Ron Newman was your coach on that team, wasn't he?
Yeah. So what happened is that, I was approached maybe a year, 6 months before the MLS started, and they were signing players from indoor that had a little bit of, who they knew who they were. And I was lucky enough to get a contract even before the combine, which was great. And then, draft day came, and I had no idea. I actually thought I was going to go to Dallas because David Durr was actually the coach of Dallas, who was connected to Western Illinois. And I know Ted Eck was already going to go there also. So I'm like, well, he knows me. I'm going to go to Dallas. And it just worked out that I think it was the third round, Ron took a chance on me, which was awesome, and I was living in San Diego in an apartment at the time, just got done in Anaheim playing indoor. And, it was an amazing experience in terms of being, just getting a call and saying you're part of the first, pro league in a long time, and the MLS that we've been hearing about for the last 2 years since the, World Cup.
And you and Paul Wright hook up again.
Did actually there was a
on
lot
that
of
Wizard team?
Yeah. So what was ironic, and obviously that. So Ron Newman was the coach, and Guy Newman was his assistant, and Alan Mayer was the goalkeeper coach. So all indoor, and watching Alan Mayer playing in San Diego. So yeah, I mean that was amazing experience in terms of our coaching staff. And then the way that the draft worked out was that he drafted a lot of indoor players. So myself, at that time, Mark Chung, who was on the national team, also played for the San Diego Sockers. So that was somebody that Ryan Tinsley, he drafted part of the Sockers. Preki, was a DL player that was put on our team, indoor player. So when we showed up on the very first day, there was like 8 of us, all indoor players, that everybody kind of knew each other. And that actually helped us in the first year, because we had a really, really good team the very first year that we lost in the semifinals, I think in a shootout to the Galaxy. And a lot of that was because of the chemistry and knowing everybody and just knowing the indoor side of the players that were on the team, and then adding players. And to me, it was amazing just because going back and playing outdoor, hadn't played outdoor since 91, and then playing with players that just literally played in the World Cup 2 years ago. Right. So I was playing center back. Uche Okafor, who played for the Nigerian national team for 2 World Cups, was my other center back. You know, Preki was there. Eric Eichmann was there. Frank Klopas was on our team. Digital Takawera, who played for Zimbabwe. Mo Johnson, who played for Scotland in 2 World Cups and Glasgow. And so it was almost like I was in awe, right? Because for me, I'm in my mind, I'm just an indoor player coming to try to play outdoor, and I got all these World Cup stars. And so it really humbled me and made me actually work harder to try to live up to the standards that set with all of these players.
Well, Sean, I mean, your nickname, Tower of Power, okay? You're not a small man. How does your physical size adapt to the indoor field as opposed to the outdoor field in your own personal skill set? Because you played indoors your whole career.
Yeah. I think there were some challenges, right? Being 6'2" and 190. I wish I was 190 now, but 6'2", 190 and running up and down the field and you're playing with players that maybe not as tall as you, that are quicker, faster, stronger. So I think that playing the outdoor game gave me a little bit more leverage in terms of my physicality that I brought to the table, because I think I brought a lot of that to the table when I played. And brought that into the indoor game because it's confined. But I really struggled playing against players that were 5'7", 5'8", twice as fast as me. Like a Kobe Jones. When I played outdoor against him and I had to mark him, I did not want to be out on that island against Kobe Jones because he just literally. I like to think I'm not slow, but he just goes right by me. So you really have to learn angles, and I think that's what the game of indoor, and I've had a lot of conversations with like Keith Tozer and coaches Omid Namazi and about what the indoor game actually helps players. And one of the things I think I was lucky enough that it really helped the defensive side of my game and learning angles and how to mark and how to cheat in terms of how to mark somebody ball side, goal side, and taking chances and those type of things. It really helped me. So when I did start playing again in 96, that I kind of had that edge in terms of seeing it from an indoor perspective.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Even though you were playing outdoors in the MLS, you were still playing indoors. I mean, during the time with the Wizards, you're playing the Detroit Rockers, and you were with the Detroit Rockers until 2001. So you're playing year-round soccer from pretty early on. Because earlier you're playing year-round soccer with 2 different indoor leagues. Now you're playing indoor. You're playing year-round soccer with outdoors and indoors going off season. So you're playing year-round soccer for 5 or 6 years. It looks like.
Yeah, it slowed down
year-round soccer for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. So it kind of slowed down a little bit during MLS because MLS didn't really want you to play indoor. They laxed a little bit with me, so I got to play maybe 10 games with Detroit or 15 games a season. But I really only did that 1 year. I think I went there another year for maybe 5 or 6 games and ended up getting hurt, and definitely wouldn't recommend that to anybody, right? Because of your body and as you're getting older. And when I went into the MLS, I was 27, right? So I wasn't 21. I was 27 through 31 when I went into the MLS. And so in your prime, starting to go out of your prime in terms of what everybody thinks your prime should be for soccer. So, that was, and again, I would never take anything back, but it was one of those things where you had to kind of I had to manage my body coming from indoor 91 through 95 and then going outdoor. I really had a tough year in 96, the first year, because my body's used to going, sprinting for a minute and then coming out and taking a break. Whereas outdoor, it's, 90 minutes and you need to be that fit and your body gets used to it. So
after this period of time, you are no longer playing Major League Soccer, and you're not playing for the Detroit Rockers any longer. You're picked up. I guess the Detroit Rockers folded, or maybe it was the league, but I think it was the team. The team folded, and then you're picked up in a dispersal draft by the Baltimore Blast.
Yeah,
and you played for the Baltimore Blast for a couple of years. You won a championship with the Baltimore Blast.
I did, and actually even too in the meantime of that, also got lucky enough to be called up to the national team for futsal in '96 with Keith Tozer, right? So. That was part of the whole MLS experience and going through and playing 10 years in futsal. So from 96 to 2004, played futsal in that sense. But yeah, so dispersal draft, Detroit, I left the MLS in 2000, decided not to stay, go back and play indoor, was having my third kid, Gracie, and decided to go back to Detroit and play. And then in 1 year it folded. So we're like, oh my gosh, now what we're going to do. Baltimore picked me up, which was an amazing thing for us as a family. Went to Baltimore, played 2 seasons there. First season lost, I think, in the semifinal. And then the second year there ended up winning the championship there with an amazing group of players. Brett Phillips, Lee, Dewan Bader, Scott Heileman was in goal also. Just Tariq Walker, Paul Wright, actually, from Kansas City, ended up going to Baltimore. I met Paul in Baltimore, so we played in Baltimore a little bit. He left mid-season of the championship. But, yeah, it was, Danny Kelly was there, who ended up being amazing coach for Baltimore down the road. So that group of players was probably one of my favorite teams just because we came together, and I ended up being a coach for a while, a player coach on that team in 2002. And that was kind of the start of the run of Baltimore. I only stayed there and then got traded to San Diego. But that was really, I think, the start of Baltimore and a lot of the championships that they won.
You mentioned futsal. And so let's take a little detour on the futsal conversation. 36 caps with the United States national team. And all in all, from 1996 to 2004, making appearances for the national futsal team. So talk a little bit about that part of your career.
Sure. Was actually surprised. I didn't even know what futsal was in 1996. So after my MLS season, had a good season, I thought, in my mind, and got called up to the national team for futsal. John Kowalski was the coach. Keith Tozer was the assistant coach at the time. And had a training. They brought us all to Pittsburgh. And then we went down to Brazil. So my very first experience, we went down to Brazil and played on the beach of Rio de Janeiro. They built a stadium.
Wow.
They built about 2,000 or 3,000.
Wow.
It was awesome. And the problem is that none of us knew how to play futsal. So we went down there and played Brazil, who, their culture, they grow up playing futsal. That's how, in soccer, really, that's how they start, is in the futsal world. And then they start dispersing into the outdoor, or at least at the time. And so we went down there, in our very first game, we lost 17-1. So, after that, it was not a good experience in terms of, as competitive people that we are, and seeing, kind of our lunch handed to us, right? And so even after the trip, I went to Keith and John. I go, hey, listen, I'm 6'2", 190. You can't, at that time, futsal was a little bit different. You couldn't really touch anybody. You couldn't slide tackle. There wasn't any physicality to the game at that particular time because the rules have changed. And so I'm like, why'd you call me up? I don't understand, because I can't kick anybody. I can't be physical with anybody. And so, but one of the greatest things about futsal is that it taught me, skills I never thought I had. It taught me different ways of getting out of tight situations. So when I went back and played outdoor, when I went back and played indoor, it just gave me a whole different perspective of the game of soccer, because we didn't grow up with futsal, right? And the other thing that it provided me is I played in the 19. So then from that tournament, he made the World Cup team. So we made the World Cup in 1996. We went over to Segovia, Spain, and played in the World Cup, which was, you're putting on the national team jersey. It was one of those experiences that, if you've never put on a national team jersey, it's really hard to describe. It's really something, you're playing for something more than just yourself. You're playing for the players, your country. We didn't have a great tournament because we were, Victor Nogueira was on the team. Frank Klopas was on the team. We had really good players, but nothing that we got to gel. There's no gel because we've never played football before. And then, if you push forward into 2004, at the end of my career, we made the World Cup again in 2004 and played in Taiwan with a group of players that were pretty much all indoor players. Keith Tozier was the coach at that time, and made me the captain for about 8 years when I was on the team when he was the coach. And we really, had a great group of players for 4 or 5 years that really, at 2004, we really hit a height, and we actually got through the knockout round in the World Cup, which was in Taiwan. And then we played Brazil in the knockout game, and we ended up losing, I think it was 8-6 or 9-7. And it was 5 with about 3 minutes left to go, which, 8 years before that, we lost 17-1. And now we're winning 6-5 with 3 minutes left in the game. So futsal had come a long way. Players have come a long way. And, now 20 years later, where futsal is. So, just having those two experiences and playing in an actual World Cup and being part of that and getting national team caps. And, it was a great experience. And the biggest thing, it helped me as a player, because when I came back and played, whether it was for the Soccers, indoor, in the MLS, it helped me. As a player, you always try to get better on an everyday basis.
Well, let's take this conversation into the current day, because currently you're hugely involved in 619 futsal. Talk a little bit about what that's all about.
Yeah. So in 2011, you started 619 futsal. At that time I was a coach for the women's team at Miramar College and a full-time professor. And I wanted to give back to the community. It's something like, I didn't grow up with futsal. It helped me tremendously. So we started 619 futsal, and we started with just leagues. So, in 2011 through 2017, we had leagues that we had. So you could put your team in and play, and really wasn't any instruction. And then in 2018, we actually started our 619 Futsal Academy. So 2018 to now, I can just tell you, when we started, we probably had about 50 kids in our academy. Now we're at 210 kids in our academy, players that they train for 9 months, and they come to us once a week and they train and they learn futsal. Futsal is a completely different game than soccer or indoor. Very confined space, very fast. You can't hide. It's 4v4 plus goalies. And, it's something that now we're developing players. And that's really what I wanted to have out of 619 futsal, is the development of players at any age. And most of our players are competitive players that want to go on and play in college. Obviously have pro aspirations, but really helping them get into college and get an education.
Do you run into or interact with Jacques Ladouceur at all with his organization that he's coaching?
Yeah. So Jacques, he lives I live in Temecula, Marietta. He lives up in this area also. And he was, and is part of the Temecula futsal club that's up here. We do things together. But Jacques and I talk, periodically. He came and sang the national anthem a few times for us for the Soccers. He's written a couple books, very inspirational. Every time we have the alumni game, I put Jacques on my team because he's still one of the fittest guys I've ever seen. So he runs up and down. And so love that about him. But great human being, in it for the right reasons and everything he does, and got nothing but love for him.
Yeah. I mean, when I did a audio video series with him promoting his most recent book, Raising a Pro Athlete, and we got to talking about, because a lot of the background video we have for that video series we took during his futsal training. And I knew what you were doing. It was 619 futsal. And I asked him if you guys interacted much together. And he said every once in a while, you guys actually come together and have tournaments, play tournaments against and with each other. Yeah, that's really cool. That's really, really cool. So, okay, so back to where we were. So you played for the Baltimore Blast, and then you get picked up by the San Diego Sockers in 2003. This time, so now this is the second incarnation or iteration of the San Diego Sockers. You played briefly at the very tail end of the first iteration under Ron Newman. Now you're playing in the second team, San Diego Sockers, and this is under Brian Quinn. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we won the championship in Baltimore, and my wife a week later just like, hey, listen, like we've gone everywhere with you, Kansas City, Detroit, Baltimore. We had a 1, 3, and 5-year-old, and we both went to the same high school. She's a year older, she's a year older than I am. She's like, it's time to go home, which I completely agreed. And so talked to Ed Hale, and he's like, yep, we'll trade you back to San Diego, and traded me to San Diego and came here and was lucky enough to play under Brian Quinn. I think the problem at that time was the ownership group. I really don't think the ownership group really knew what they were getting into. And I don't think they had the finances, right? So the Sockers, second generation of the Sockers at that particular time only lasted. Actually, when I went to the World Cup for futsal in 2004, when I came home, the Sockers folded. So it really did not last very long in terms of having the new ownership, which, at that age, I think I was 35, 36. I'm not going to go and leave again and go play indoor somewhere else. And we had kids in school. And so I just decided like, hey, I'm going to hang it up and go back to school, get my master's and maybe go into college coaching. At that time I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but love the experience coming back home, again, playing with some amazing players, and playing for Brian Quinn, which, as a legend, watching him play. And Brian did some coaching in the MLS too, and, national team and, amazing resume. So I loved it. I loved my time here. It was just kind of cut short.
Now we kind of skipped over this a little bit, but you've been, at this point, you've been coaching. I mean, you coached for a brief time as an assistant coach at William Jewell College. As you mentioned, you were a player coach with the Rockers and with the Blast. Is this now what you're talking about here? Is this a time you're with California Baptist University? Are you coaching and playing and going to school there?
Yeah. So kind of as I'm going through, and getting older, going into the coaching world was something that I wanted to do and coach with the Rockers and coach with the Baltimore Blast. And then when I came here, I ended up coaching some high school. There's a brand new high school that opened up here, Vista Marietta, at that time in 2003. And then got into college coaching at Cal Baptist on the women's side, and ended up being there for a couple of years and being the head coach there for 1 year. And then when the Sockers folded, I got my master's right around that time in kinesiology, and then ended up getting a full-time job as a full-time professor at Miramar College, where, again, full circle, where I used to go when I was a student, and then started the women's soccer program there in 2007.
And are you still involved with that organization? Are you still doing that?
Not with Miramar, no. So Miramar, I ended up, that's kind of where the Sockers came in. So from 2007, I was coaching 2007 to 2016. So I was there for almost 9 years. And then in 2016 is when Phil came to me about being the general manager of the Sockers. Okay,
so 7 years before that, Phil came to you about bringing the San Diego Sockers back in 2009. And again, you're getting together with Paul Wright. I mean, you and Paul Wright, you and Paul Wright seem to be doing a little bit of this throughout your lives. Back and forth.
Listen, I've got pictures. I got pictures of Paul and I playing in all-star games, and I'm trying to mark him, which I would never want to do. Our kids were born in Kansas City together when we played on on the Wizards. We played in Baltimore, together. So yeah, our paths, grew up at 16 years old. So our paths have intertwined, and only for the positive. We've had our ups and downs in terms of, playing against each other, or, being on the same team together and maybe not seeing eye to eye and everything all the time, but nothing but love for Paul. And when Phil brought the Sockers back in 2009, and I remember that conversation. I was actually at the Oceanside Beach tournament that the Sockers were playing at that particular time.
Yep.
Right. And I sat down with Phil, and Phil's like, hey, we want you to come back and play. And, just for 1 year, it would be great. And you can, just play home games at the time, because I was full-time professor. I couldn't travel. And it worked out. It was great for me. I think I wish I was probably more involved with the team at that time, because I didn't go on away trips. I just played at home. But just being back on the field with Paul and a young Childs, Susie, Riley Swift, David Beltran, like all of the players that were new and old and veterans and young players. And we really, mashed together, and we won the championship that year at home in Del Mar, which was great.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that was a fun time. I mean, it was a fun time. As a fan, it was kind of interesting because, of course, through the first two iterations of the San Diego Sockers, it's happening all down into the sports arena. And now it's at an equestrian semi-outdoor venue, at Del Mar. In Del Mar, and I was living in Encinitas at the time, so I mean, Del Mar sounded pretty good to me. It was the travel time. The travel time was. It was
good unless you got it was good unless there was fog, right? So I remember a couple games we played, and there was like fog, and you could hardly see the field, and it was a little bit crazy.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think it just added some flair. It added, we're used to playing in an actual arena, and in all of the indoor arenas I played, it was unique because it wasn't something that you've ever done before, kind of like an indoor-outdoor arena.
Well, and Richard's helped us out a lot here, where the rain and wind meets the AstroTurf. And
true.
And that was true. I mean, I can remember when it rained. The area. Now, I don't remember if the field actually got wet, but I know that a lot of areas really close to the field weren't entirely covered. The wind would be blowing in off the Pacific Ocean, wearing coming in with your jackets on, because it was wintertime. This is when I turned my son on to the game. You guys, the San Diego Sockers come back, and I'm thinking, I can't remember how old he was at the time, but I wanted to experience this, and it was kind of fun for me sharing with him, kind of reliving the good old days, because as you say, you won the championship and again and again and again. You won those championships, those 4 in a row there. All of them weren't at Del Mar, but with that team. And let me tell you, this is kind of funny, what concessions can do for a fan, especially a young fan, because the tri-tip sandwiches that were sold at Del Mar, at the Del Mar Arena, were the selling point for me to get my kid to go to the game. It was, I will get you a tri-tip sandwich if you go to the game with me.
Hey, whatever it takes. I'm going to remember that. With our new, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely a great experience. I will tell you that I think, after a couple of years and moving back into the old sports arena, which is now Pechanga Arena, was a very smart thing. Phil, at that time, John Quintero was the general manager, was a very smart move. And so,
yes,
I think that was a great thing that they did. Nothing against Del Mar, because I think it was unique, but I think that was the step to go back into the sports arena.
Absolutely. Now, how many years was it that between you no longer playing on the field and taking the general manager position with the team?
So in 2009-10, we won the championship, and then I was so tired. I was so tired that I retired, right? I think I was 41 years old at the time, and went back to coaching and teaching. And then I got a call. Actually, the way it really happened was I saw Cheeky at a restaurant up here in Marietta, at a sushi restaurant. And him and I just started talking. And he's like, you really need to get involved with the Sockers. We really could use you. So it kind of just stuck in my mind, but nothing really happened. And then I found out that John Quintera ended up stepping down. And so Phil and I had a conversation. And, at the time, my wife's like, what are you doing? You're 10 years, you're tenured, you're teaching, you're set for life. Why would you leave that job? And just to be honest, I'm into challenges. I'm into trying to, my experiences that I've had in soccer and in life, I want to help teach others to do that. And I think I did that at the community college level, and I wanted to do that at the higher level in professional soccer, right? And so, being connected to Phil and Cheeky and the Sockers organization, it just kind of happened, and we talked a lot. And the other part of that too was which I'm sure we're going to talk about, was the new arena thought process, right? Because that was one of the dangling carrots at the time, and this was 2016, and now we're 2023 going to 2024. But that was a premonition that Phil had even at that time. And
wow,
which was great, and probably is one of the reasons why it pushed me to make that decision, because not only with being in charge of such an historic organization, but also now building an arena that's a landmark, right, and that's going to leave a legacy in the community of Oceanside.
So let's go ahead and go to that conversation. We're coming close to an hour. Let's go ahead and have that conversation. So there's just before that. I mean, I don't really want to skip over these years with the San Diego Sockers, because I mean, there's been a process from the Sockers in the PASL to what the Sockers are today in the MASL. As far as the team is concerned, there's been kind of a cultural switch as far as the players are concerned, and a couple of championships, MASL championships recently. Last year, top, regular season, top of the game. And so the team is, firing on all cylinders under your watch, during your watch. I mean, they're really doing outstanding. And you've mentioned chemistry a few times, and there seems to be whoever it is in your guys' front office that's doing the scouting is really doing the top job, because your guys are finding players that are coming onto the team that seem to, in the most part, I mean, some of them come in and don't seem to gel all that great, and they're shortly, dispatched out to other places. But for the most part, these players are coming in and they seem to be getting with the program, taking on the, what Phil is putting out there, and really doing an outstanding job. And we expect here in San Diego nothing less, obviously, right? Yeah, I mean that really is how it flies. And you guys, not only from the fan standpoint, but from the front and back office players, the whole thing, it really means something when a player puts this thing on their chest and plays for the San Diego Sockers. There's a mystique, there's something for that, and it's well earned, and it's a historical thing for many, many, many years. But it's exciting, and the buzz around the league is Front Wave Arena. And I know that you have a Front Wave part in the Front Wave Arena. I know you're yeah. I know you're huge. I know you're hugely involved in everything that's going on
Sure.
with that. Talk a little bit about how that's going,
Sure.
where you are and where you're going with that.
Yeah, so kind of a two-part question, right? So the first part was on, obviously, with the Sockers and what we've done. And I'm only going to talk about since the time I've been there to where we are right now. And coming into the Sockers, I really didn't come in in terms of like, okay, this is how everything has to be. I actually came in and listened a lot. I listened to front office staff. I listened to trainers. I listened to players. I listened to Phil and Cheeky and the things that were going well, and then the things that needed to change. And I think that over, the last 6, 7, 8 years, there's been a process and reasons why we've done those things to lead us to where we are today, which is championships at, the MASL level, championships at the M2 level. But it wasn't an easy process. We lost some good players on the way. There was, and I think one of the major things that we did is we changed the culture in the locker room. We changed the culture as a coaching staff. We changed the culture, especially in the front office, where everybody has a voice. And I think all those little things have added up to winning championships, because there is always that expectation in San Diego that it is championship or bust, right? I mean, last year we lost in double overtime on a great goal that Chihuahua scored, but we don't accept that, right? And that's the motivation now for this year, right? Other championships, love them, we respect them, but today, like with all of our players, if we're not motivated now because of what happened last year, then we're in the wrong spot. You're on the wrong team, because winning a championship is what the Julie V's and the Brian Quinns and the Alan Mayers and the Victor Nogueras and the Jim Gorsicks, that's the foundation that they laid for all of these players coming in. And some players can handle that. Some players can handle that expectation and you see them rise. And some players can't, because for whatever reason, they can't say, they can't do that. And they usually don't stay here very long. And so, and when you say about player personnel, one of the things that we did change here is that we wanted our players to feel like they were professionals, right? When they showed up, they have game day massages, little things. They have massages after a game. We started feeding our staff on game day, little things that I saw as a player that really stood out to me. I wanted to bring this to our players so that when they step on the field, there's no excuse why you can't be at your optimum, right? Hey, I didn't get that. Hey, that wasn't done. Hey, they have everything. And I think that's one of the other reasons why players and really good players want to come here, is because they're treated well. They're held accountable for what they do. And there's an expectation that they're at that high level all the time. Just like we do in the front office. All the people that I work with, and I say that because we work with each other, no one works for anybody, is that there's that high level of, we want to be the best front office. We want to sell the most tickets. We want to be the best social media. We want to be best in the community. And I think it's a trickle down. It's all about, I say it's all about excellence on and off the field.
Yeah. And that's really, that's very, I don't know it's kind of this is a basketball analogy, but it's a full court press. I mean, it's hitting from, like you say, the small details. There was I don't know how much you follow sailing, but there was a San Diego sailor by the name of Dennis Conner that was briefly he was an owner for the Sockers. He was a part owner for the Sockers at one point, but he wrote a book that was called No Excuse to Lose. And the whole premise of that book is kind of exactly what you're talking about. When you go in there, if you're beaten, you're beaten because you were bested, not because you missed anything. There's absolutely, we didn't leave any excuse wide open to lose. You can't turn around and say, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, and so we didn't hit the ground as the best we could be. We hit the ground as the best we could be, and the other team bested us today. And so in the case of no excuse to lose, and it seems to be a very similar premise to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and Suddy, the funny thing is that there's always up and downs, right? There's always up and downs, and really, it really came to fruition, the championship we won over COVID. because we did not have a good regular season. I think we were 4-7. I think we played 11 games. We played all the games on the road. And Phil and I really had a heart-to-heart about some things, and we changed some player personnel. We brought new player personnel in. We were holding, we did a couple things to shake some things up because we needed to be better in terms of a general manager and coaching. And ever since that time, and we decided to do a couple things different. Since that time, we've won that championship. The next year we won the next championship. And then this past year, obviously heartbreaker that we lost in the semifinal. But it's a testament to a lot of different people, but especially Phil as the owner, as the coach being open-minded, Renee Ortiz on board, Cheeky, the player personnel, because most of the player personnel is done by them. They bring the players in that they want because I want them coaching players that they want there. I'm not going to tell them who to coach. Right. You bring the players in that you want. I'm just going to hold everybody accountable. And as a player, you want to get better. So that's my thing. Come to practice every day. Be ready to go. You want to get better. You want to get fitter. And so we have a really good mix of different personalities from as a general manager or coach or assistant coaches, and we all have each other's backs and blend together really well.
So let me put this up from Glenn Maddock. What's Sean's perspective on health of the league and move to more clubs in Mexico?
Well, one, the first part of that is I think the health of the league is really good right now. I think over the last year or two, with Keith coming on board as the commissioner, Keith has a lot of knowledge. Obviously, he was my coach on the futsal national team for 10 years. He is someone that strives for success. A lot of things that I implement at the soccer's level is things I've learned from him as a coach and as I was a player. So in the terms of the league itself and the direction with JP and Shep and owners that we have in the league now, it's very, very promising. It's been in the indoor league a long time. You've seen owners come and go. Owners come in like, hey, we got this, and this, and they're gone the next year. So I think that's happened, and we have a very good, stable core. Everybody's looking for success. In terms of Mexico, we love going down to Mexico. We love going down there and playing Chihuahua, who won the whole thing last year. And congratulations to them. And, Monterrey. And, I think it's, I'd like to see, maybe some Canadian teams come in and so that we have both borders that we could go across. Because back in the day, we used to play against Toronto and we used to have some teams at Edmonton and Vancouver. And so, yeah, I think the league is moving forward, and we have great leadership from the top all the way down to the owners. And, the players are phenomenal. The players that we have right now, there's always that argument, players now to the players how they used to be. The game just completely have changed. It's right. The athlete now is bigger, stronger, faster in that terms, right? So it's really hard to compare, and I don't ever compare because they're their own era and what they do. Right. But, just on our team alone, with Leo and Childs and Serta and Boris and goal. And I can list our whole roster, and just having, that full roster on there. And I'm sure everybody in the league can do the same, but, we're blessed to have the team that we have. And we're really, really looking forward to this year. We've added a few components with Ruggles and Masta, and, our team, we'll have a chip on our shoulder because it didn't end the way we wanted it to end. And I like it. When we have a chip on our shoulder, we're a completely different team.
All right. So let's close out the conversation with a little update about Front Wave Arena.
Whew, man, it's. I don't know if you've been out there, but it's awesome. The steel's up. They're putting the roof on right now, and this is a facility that will house about 5,000 to 6,000 for a sporting event, anywhere from 6,000 to 7,500 for a concert, depending if it's on the end stage or in the round. We have suites. We have a
Nice.
plaza that's like 15,000 square feet. It sits in the El Corazon community, which, is right in front of the SoCal soccer complex in Oceanside. It's a great piece of land. There's a aquatic center there. We're going to have, the plaza is going to have an outdoor stage, outdoor seating. On a Friday night, if you're bored, you can come out and listen to live music and, have a margarita or have a beer and just kind of chill. And, one of the things that I compare it to, if you've ever been to Europe and you're walking in England, or my son played in Denmark, and you're walking down the street, and then all of a sudden you have a stadium pop up, right, in the residential zone that never happens in America. Well, it's happening in Oceanside because, there's apartments literally right across the street. There's condos across the street, and it's really right in the middle of, houses right down the street. So it's really this intimate, arena that I would, as a player, would be so excited to play at, because playing in arenas, different arenas. I played like in Joe Louis Arena that had 18,000 people, and you only have 1,000 people in there. Doesn't do it justice, right? Played in CompuWare Arena in Detroit that had 3,000. It was packed every night. That atmosphere is amazing, and I think that's what's going to happen at Front Wave Arena. And we can't wait. I mean, we're just chomping at the bit to get into our new home and to play there. And I think it's good for the Sockers. It's good for the city of San Diego and Oceanside, and it's really good for our league, because having a new facility will really, step up the game, I think, from us playing. And that's nothing against Pechanga Arena. It's just that we're going to have our own facility and we're control our own when we can play. Because sometimes, like you've been to games, we played Sunday nights. We want Saturday, right? We want Fridays, and that was one of the reasons why we built the arena, so we can have dates, and it's not expensive, and we have our own budget line. So there's a lot of different reasons why, Phil decided to do that, and it's great to see it all come to fruition, because it's something that Phil and Josh and Terry and Rob, everybody that's connected to it now, and Eric, that's really putting their heart and soul into something that's going to leave a legacy for years and decades to come.
All right, one last question from Frank Saragosa. So when will the Sockers put out their player roster for the upcoming season?
Well, we're working on it, right? So it's just kind of funny. It's today that we're having this interview, but today kind of the rough draft of the schedule came out. And I think that, rosters are still being built. We technically still have a tryout that's going to be the second week of November. So we won't have a full roster out, until preseason, which will probably be November 15th. And then even though you're going to be inviting others in, but we have a really good solid core of 14, 15, 16 right now that, we're very happy about. And I think Phil and Chiki have done a wonderful job of keeping the players, and then also adding a couple elements that I think that we need to, win another championship.
Sean Bowers, San Diego Sockers General Manager, thank you so much for spending this time with me this afternoon. Like I said at the very beginning, I know you're a busy man, and I really do appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me today, buddy.
Sonny, anything for you, my man. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me and having me share some of my story. I appreciate you.